Hello. Can one of you confirm if you can see my screen?
Hey, yeah, I can see it.
Okay, thank you. Let's give another minute for anyone else to join. And if you're already in the call, please remember to write your name to the attendees list. Okay, I think we can start. If you are in the call, please make sure to write your name in the attendance. Oh yeah, I already said that. No updates, so I'll just see if there are any topics in the agenda. I don't see anything, so I just added like some like release milestones here. So anyone has questions or anything which we can go through it now. Otherwise, we'll just go through the thing which I have put here. All right, yeah, I can give an update on, I think we did release Alpha 2 last Friday. It contains pretty much all the instruments, and we also released the Prometheus exporter. It was a revamped version because we already had a version like one and a half year back. So this is a new version which supports the current metrics API, although it has a major bug which basically makes it useless. So that's why we would be releasing Alpha 3 this Friday, which would contain like even more changes to the exporter interface. So I have the draft PR out already. So at the end of this PR, I would expect all the exporters would be looking like very similar to the tracing and logging signal. It's not fully baked yet, so I'm still working through it. So mostly OTLP is done, but I'll sync with Alan to make sure like I haven't broken anything. And Prometheus is also fixed. I was just testing it a few minutes earlier, so it should be like ready for part of the release this Friday. So the PR is right now like fairly big because it's mostly like my work in progress. So I'll break it down and send smaller PRs if that makes reviewing helpful. But basically the like key things here is updated in the milestone. So it's mostly performance thing. So now with this change, the collection or the export would be like zero allowed, very similar to tracing part. And I also removed all the explicit logs in 2 of the aggregations. For histogram, I did try, but I couldn't figure out the right way. So histogram would still have logs, but all the other things, there are no logs anymore. In the aggregation part, we still use the dictionary, so it still has logs. That is something which we can revisit later. Okay, and also I implemented some caps just to protect SDK from like indefinitely growing memory, because I think the Java folks reported these issues and they started shipping metrics last week. So we are just trying to be like safer. There is no configuration for customers to change it. I think I defined some hard limits like 1,000 metric streams to the max, and within each metric up to 2,000 metric points. So something like that. We'll figure out what's a good number because the spec is not likely to specify anything about this. So this is just to protect the SDK. Yeah, and just going through the milestone. So this is what I just described for the release coming in a couple of days, this Friday. And we'll be doing another alpha release next week because given that this is a fairly big change on the exporter side, I expect there will be some feedback from exporter authors. So one of them is myself writing Prometheus, and then Alan is writing OTLP, and Utkarsh is doing a Microsoft internal exporter as well. So we'll get like feedback from 3 and address any feedbacks. And also there is a spec now written for metric reader. It's not merged as of this morning, but I expect it to be merged like by end of this week. So by next release, if that spec is merged, we'll try to align ourselves with this thing. We are like conceptually similar, except that we don't use the same name. We use the term like push and pull metric processor, and it should be like modified to match whatever the spec says. And also quite likely we'll support multiple exporters. Again, like, since the spec doesn't say anything about how to support multiple things, we'll by default do it as independent pipeline. So if you have like 2 exporters, they'll all be working on independent aggregator stores, and everything would be independent. And like later, if you think we need to like improve the performance for that scenario, we can try to be like really smart about it, having the same pipeline shared by multiple. But quite likely we won't need that, because based on what I hear from the metric spec, it's quite likely that in production people would only run like 1 exporter. And also this is matching what we have for tracing. So even for tracing today, if you add like 2 exporters, it kind of runs 2 separate pipeline, like each with its own circular buffer to keep things. So we're not like any worse than that. So after that, I will like with this thing, like I would say that we are like mostly stabilized. We don't expect like any big major changes. Everything after this would be like additive. So I'm planning to rename it as beta after the 4th alpha. And that's where we are introducing views, which would be like an additive change. I don't expect any change for export interface or instrumentation. So it's just an additive change. Like again, more features. So there is a thing called exemplar in the spec, which just got merged 2 days back. Yeah, so that's the only thing which I can have some visibility into, and probably like October is good for like other performance optimizations and things like that. So any questions on like milestone? I have like asked for everyone who is working on the metrics, but any questions so far on this? All right, yeah. So there is an ask from the spec to mark the SDK as experimental and the API spec as stable. However, the concern is most languages, there is no SDK implementation yet, so there isn't much feedback. So as per the spec and maintenance meeting, the specs would only be marked stable after at least 3 languages are like ready for like beta, ready with like beta, and they implement it. So one of them is Java, and .NET is second, and hopefully like Python or Go would be there. So I'm trying to see like if any of you work with customers, if you have any feedback, please like let us know like at the earliest. In case of .NET, it's the API is already stable. It's already like a like code freeze. We have the last fix went in like about a week and a half back, so there wouldn't be any more code changes or API changes in metric. So in the API side. So if you have any feedback, please let us know, because we promised we would be doing the beta release on middle or end of September. We'll get dates from Java, because this is basically going to affect when would these specs would get marked as stable or experimental or feature freeze, whatever that term they are using. So it's just asking like if you have customers, please ask them to try it out. I think by end of this Friday, we would have a reasonably confident thing people can try out. So ask people, I mean, your customers to use it and let us know feedbacks. Okay, that's pretty much the update I have. So Alan, you wanted to discuss something about the OTLP bugs. Can you like briefly describe what, I mean, I think I'll let you go first, and maybe after that I can describe what I intend to do with the refactoring part.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I noticed a few bugs in my implementation of the OTLP exporter, namely around transforming histogram stuff, because when I wrote it, it was before we had histogram support. So anyways, it should be a pretty simple bug fix. I just was not handling the buckets correctly, or transforming the buckets correctly.
Okay.
Though separate from the bug fix in the OTLP exporter, this might be a minor thing, but I did notice that the histogram aggregator, our histogram buckets have a low boundary and a high boundary.
Mhm.
And the way that the .NET SDK has modeled it is that the high boundary
Oh, yeah, got it.
is
We are upside down.
exclusive rather than inclusive of the,
Yes.
and that's different than how the OTLP
Yeah.
data model is done. I was wondering if that was intentional or not.
No, Utkarsh raised the same question like a couple of days back. I thought I'll ask Victor whether it was intentional. Maybe like he wrote it when the spec was not stable. So
Okay.
I'll confirm with Victor whether it was intentional. And if yes, there is any reason. Otherwise, I'll consider it as a typo or like just a bug. We'll fix it. Yeah,
Okay.
we got the ups. I mean the inclusive and exclusive like reversed. That's
Yeah.
what. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's the same as what Utkarsh mentioned like 2 days back. So yeah, I'll take it out and ask Victor if there is any like reason behind it. Otherwise, I will fix it.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, I think it should be a small fix. And let me know if you need a hand on that or whatever. Or
Yeah, that should be like. Yeah, I haven't touched the histogram yet today. I mean, in the refactoring because I could not figure out. I mean, I thought I had the log-free way of updating histogram, but then that didn't work out the way I expected. So it still has log, so I didn't include it here. But I will see if there is any way we can avoid the log because all other aggregations we should be mostly good. There shouldn't be like any need of logs. Yes, so there's a question here like summary aggregation. Is that a thing anymore? I had the same question with the spec folks today. So as per the current spec, it's considered as, let me open the actual spec. It's like maintained only for like some backward compatibility reason with, I don't know, maybe it's like open metrics or open census. So in the SDK spec, the spec for aggregators got merged about a week back and it explicitly lists the kind of aggregations here. So there is no summary here. So that would mean we won't have summary, at least in the V1, like maybe in the future there would be. So I think the only thing which is missing is, no, are we missing anything? I think histogram can cover like everything. So I don't know whether like there would be a need for summary. Somewhere in the spec or like the OTLP, it says the summary is only maintained for like backward compatibility. It's only in the OTLP. Yeah, it's only in the OTLP model, but nowhere else it's mentioned.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Actually, a colleague of mine mentioned that he'd noticed that in the Java SDK that they had removed the summary aggregator from their implementation. So I don't think it's a big deal. I'm going to poke around. I hadn't noticed that it was removed from the spec. But right now,
it says legacy. This is what I remember reading. It says it's not recommended for new applications, and it exists for compatibility with other formats. So, I mean, since we haven't shipped the SDK, like every application which we have would be like new application. So,
yeah, I think the where my colleague was coming from was that right now, as it stands, New Relic is an example of a vendor that has a decent visualization for an open telemetry summary metric as it stands right now. Histogram support, though, is on the horizon, but it's pretty new. And so I wouldn't expect instrumentation to actually be generating summary metrics, but the ability to maybe configure through maybe a view once that capacity is there might be desirable. But I'm not saying that super strongly right now because I still need to like talk to some folks.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, if it's a like important thing, we should definitely raise it in the spec meeting also because at least in the initial version, there is no way like a vendor can write a new aggregator. We'll only have, I mean, we'll not be exposing any mechanism for someone to replace the built-in aggregator with a new one.
Right.
So if it's not supported by the SDK, then you don't have any way to build it. So if it is important, then we should raise it in the like Thursday or Tuesday metrics spec meeting and see whether it is a oversight or it was intentionally left out in the aggregator model, because that aggregator was like merged like about a week and a half back. So there was no like mention at all about it. So I would assume, I assume that it was already like gone. It's just there for like historical reasons. That's what I assume. But if it is otherwise, yeah, that we can like, definitely add it back, assuming spec agrees.
That sounds good. Yeah, I think my colleague already opened up an issue, so we can talk about it. I think Thursday in the metrics SDK.
Yeah, the key thing to note is like if the if the output produced by the built-in aggregators are not sufficient for any backend, then it should be raised as a spec issue, because there is no way you can work around it. Like even like we had a similar conversation for the Microsoft specific exporter, which was expecting like min and max as well, and there is none of these aggregators are producing min and max.
Right.
But like there is no way we can solve that in exporter because we don't allow any extensibility point. So, but for us, it was considered a like optional thing. So we decided not to pursue it. But if there are any similar things, it would be useful to raise in the spec.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, since there are no other questions, I can quickly summarize what I am trying to do here. So folks who are already familiar with our tracing and logging pipeline knows how does our export pipeline work. So we have a thing called, we have a fixed sized buffer. I think we call it circular buffer. Yeah, it's a circular buffer. It's a fixed size thing. So we create one at the startup, and all the activity or log would be just added into that fixed buffer. So we don't we don't ever increase the memory size. We don't allocate any memory just to store the activity or log record. The activity or log record itself is allocated somewhere, but from a pipeline perspective, it's not allocating anything. And it's a cap thing. So even if you produce activities at a very fast pace, then the exporter can keep up, will not go beyond a limit. So the cap is enforced at the circular buffer. So we just drop it. And for the actual exporter, we did not expose the circular buffer. We did not give the circular buffer to the exporter. Instead, we wrote our own abstraction on top of buffer. I think Michael called it batch. Batch. So the exporter get a batch of either activity or log record, and this batch internally knows how to navigate the circular buffer. So in short, the export cycle, or the exporting path does not have any allocations. It's just iterating through a like pre-allocated array, and the actual iterator itself is a struct. However, for metrics, it was not modeled that way. Because basically, if you look at the current code, what we are doing is we are creating a list, and that list is created fresh for each export cycle, and we copy things from the in-memory state into that list, and we give that list to the exporter. We kind of wrapped it in the batch, but that was like a fake implementation. There is no the batch does not know how to work through that list. So obviously this would be like every time you export, there will be like a lot of lists being created. So that was the number one issue which I was trying to solve. But like while I was at it, I tried to fix some other things as well. So what the proposed solution is very similar to what we did for other signals. So we have a pre-allocated array. It's not circular or anything because there is no ability to remove a data point once it's created. So we have like hard-coded n. We have an array of size n for each metric string. So what that really means is if you have a metric, when that metric is created for the very first time, we have a callback in .NET, and at that time we allocate like an array of size n, which stores all the aggregators, and all the subsequent operations would be just operating on that fixed array. So after the initial creation of the metric string, there is no extra allocation. And for exporting, I added a new overload to the existing batch so that the batch knows how to navigate through the list of metrics. So it's mostly the same as activity. So once you open the PR, you'll see that I just modified the existing batch. However, like for metric, there is a new thing, which is under each metric, we have like up to n data points. So, and this is something which I'm still like working on. So as of today, the individual metric points are a struct. And there is no way I can use the batch to navigate this metric points, because batch only takes a T of a class, so it cannot take structs. So what I did for now is I created a new thing I called it batch metric, which allows the user to walk through the metric points in an alloc free way. So that's the current change, and I'm not 100% convinced that it should be a struct. So that's few things which I will be like figuring out by end of this PR. So you can see the structure here. So this metric is what I called, this corresponds to one instrument. So every instrument will create a metric. We have a pre-allocated array of like 1,000 metrics. So if you ever create like keep creating instruments new and new, we'll cap at 1,000. And within metric, we have an array of metric points. So this is struct. This is what I'm not 100% sure about. So this is just the like overall structure. And we used to have like 4 separate aggregators, but right now all the logics are like made into this class itself. So like when you get an update, we just do the update right there without going any place. And like by doing this, we did some optimization. It's because previously in the hot path, we were kind of looking up what aggregator to pick up from a dictionary. That part is still there. However, like once we were introducing views, we were kind of looking at the view config on the hot path, figure out what to do with the incoming measurement. So kind of moved all those logic into the metric construction. So we decide like this is a place where metric is being created or an instrument is created. So we decide what type of instrument it is and what type of aggregation to apply. So these decisions are made at construction time. So in the hot path where the metric recording is happening, all we do is, let me show it. So we just figure out like which like time series to update. And once you find the time series, it's just a like update call on it. So this is still a little bit expensive. In fact, this is the like 90% of cost in the hot path, because this is basically looking at the dictionary to find which time series to attach this to. And to do that, it has to do some in-memory sorting. And also this I expect will be optimized later. I'm not focusing on it right now because this is purely an internal implementation detail. Neither the export authors or the user would know it. So we should be able to optimize it later. So once views are introduced, there will be no change here, because views are taken care at the build time. And when you do the, like when you ask for the finding for a given tag, you find the time series and you just call the update. There is no need of checking whether a view exists or which views to match, because all those would be handled at the instrument creation time. So it's mostly like soldering. So when you create an instrument, you solder it to the right views already, so that when you actually get a measurement, you're already soldered. So it's not exactly like that term, but like very close to what that is. So those are the like major changes here. And of course, since I touched the exporter, I was forced to touch all the exporters, otherwise I couldn't merge it. So depending on like how big the final PR is, I might break it down into like really small ones and tackle like each exporters one by one. Maybe like I'll see like once I mark it as non-draft, if it's still hard to review, I'll break it down. Otherwise, I'll go with this. So that there are open questions, like I said, about the usage of struct versus like, I mean, the struct is, we are basically copying it. That copy cost might be more than what we save from saving the location. So those are a few things which I'm still working on, but I'll mark the PRs ready when I at least have formed my own opinion. Okay, yeah, there are like few other things which is like these would probably be like separate PRs. We can replace, try to replace the dictionary with log with a concurrent dictionary, because based on one of my experiment which I shared earlier, concurrent dictionaries seem to be faster for reads, because once the metrics like once the app starts up and warms up, most of the time we are just going to be like looking up, we are just going to read. The writes would be like very less frequent, so you might be benefiting from concurrent dictionary there. But again, it's going to be a separate thing. And this is something which I already mentioned, like the sorting of keys and values is a major cost, because all we get from .NET runtime is a read-only span, which is unordered. So we have to pay the cost of sorting it. I saw that like when the .NET folks, Nova from .NET team, when they did the prototype, they did some magic to reduce the impact here. It's, I mean, I have to check what was the thing which they did. Because I have like one like very nice solution, which is like whenever we see a new unordered thing, we can add that also to the dictionary, so that next time we don't have to sort it. But it really means like we have to spend a lot of memory for that. So yeah, but these things will be like purely internal details, so we'll cover it like subsequently. It should not affect like anyone writing exporter or using the product. So we'll worry about all these things once we have the rest of the things ready. Okay, yeah, like any like questions, or like does anyone want to like go deeper into like any of the things, or like you can let me, I can mark the PRS ready for review probably by tonight, or late at worst case like tomorrow morning, and then you can take a look. Or if you want to go over any specifics, I can do it as well. So I mean, people who are like writing exporters like have already modified console and OTLP and Prometheus, so you can see it should look very similar now. And you can mostly like copy what it is doing. So you can see like the exporter is now like exporting metric, which means the actual exporter will get a batch of metric. This is very similar to activity. So in activity case, it was a base exporter of activity. Now it's like metric, and each metric, within the metric, it can have like any number of data points. So that's what we deal with here. Like within each metric, we have these time series concepts. So yeah, that's the like summary of this PR. And yeah, this fixes all the issues with Prometheus. I have like fixed the Prometheus issue, and it's much more efficient than the previous one. So yeah, you can take a look, and if you have questions, like I mean, don't yet look at it. If you're curious, you can look, but I'm still in the draft state, so let me finish it, and we can discuss any like comments in the PR itself. All right. Are there any questions? Otherwise, I'll move to the last topic. So we have a new member to introduce. So if there are no questions, we can move on to that. Okay, so Utkarsh, do you want to like introduce new teammates? So we have, I think it's, yeah, second new joinee in our team in Microsoft. So can you do a self-intro?
Hello, my name is Ting, and I joined this team yesterday, and looking forward to contribute to the community.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time remembering the spelling, so I'll let you fill it.
Okay, it's TING. Yep.
Okay, yeah, so she'll be working along with Utkarsh and myself and like other folks in our team. So Michael Maxwell is like another new joinee to Microsoft. I expect like at least 50% of their time will be in the OpenTelemetry.NET repo. So if you have like any small issues which requires, I mean, which is good for like learning, please let us know. Like we can assign to like new joinees. I think both of them already submitted their first PRs and like already like Michael just joined the OpenTelemetry org last week. So for your team, like we'll need an approver from non-Microsoft. So I'll either ping like Michael or Alan to get that going. Okay, so welcome your team. And if you have any, I mean, you can meet like other maintainers here. Like so Alan and Michael are like two other maintainers. I think there is another maintainer like Sergey, but he's usually not active these days. So he was the one of the original like maintainers. But as of now, like it's Michael and Alan who are the maintainers, non-Microsoft. And yeah, we have other folks like Mikhail who makes a lot of contributions, but not officially like maintainers. Oh, by the way, it's also interesting. In case folks did not notice, Michael is also now part of Microsoft as of last week onwards. Okay. Yeah. Any questions? I think we did discuss something about SQL line breaking us with Michael like 2 weeks back. I haven't had the time to follow up, so we'll do that like offline with Michael and Prospect.
Sure.
All right. Yeah. Any questions to be discussed? So I will be definitely like pinging like Alan to get some help with OTLP part, and as soon as I get some more time, I'll mark the PRS ready for review, and then I'll poke Alan to get the OTLP part correct. I did like my own version. It might be working already, but who knows? Unless someone who knows the stuff looks at it. Okay. Yeah. If no other topics, we can end early. Thank you. Bye bye. See you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
y'all.
bye.
Thanks, everyone.